Ever looked up at a jetliner and thought,
Whoa.
yeah, and wondered how we went from like basically flinging ourselves off cliffs with feathery wings
Right.
to that? We've got,
It's incredible.
it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
We've got a fascinating PDF
Yeah.
called Intro into Flying.pdf right here.
Okay.
So get ready for a deep dive into aviation
Okay.
from those
Yeah.
early flight attempts to the birth of the airline industry.
Oh.
And even how the FAA went from like regulating airmail routes to
Right.
keeping our skies safe today.
It's quite a journey. And it really highlights how our understanding of the very principles of flight evolved over time.
Okay, so let's start with those early attempts.
Sure.
Okay, so we've all heard about Leonardo da Vinci's flying machines,
Yeah.
but they never actually got off the ground, did they?
No, they didn't. Da Vinci was brilliant,
Right.
but his approach was limited by what he saw in nature. He focused on replicating bird flight
Uh-huh.
with flapping wings powered by human muscle.
Okay.
What he lacked was a real grasp of aerodynamics.
Okay.
Birds are incredibly light
Right.
for their size,
Yeah.
and their wings are complex,
Yeah.
constantly adjusting to control lift, drag, and thrust.
Right.
Humans simply can't replicate that.
So even Da Vinci, with all of his genius,
Yeah.
was missing a key piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just him.
Right.
For centuries, inventors clung to this idea of
Yeah.
flapping wings.
Yeah.
It seems almost comical now, picturing those early birdmen leaping from towers
Oh, yeah.
with feathered contraptions.
Yeah.
But it underscores just how persistent
Right.
the human desire to fly has always been.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so flapping our arms like giant birds
Right.
wasn't the answer.
No.
Was there a point where that became clear?
There was.
Okay.
In 1655,
Okay.
Robert Hooke, a brilliant scientist, did some calculations and basically said, nope, not going to work.
Wow.
He realized that even with our greater strength,
Right.
our muscles are simply not powerful enough
Okay.
to flap the enormous wings we'd need
Right.
to generate enough lift
Yeah.
to get a human off the ground.
Okay, so if human-powered flight was a dead end,
Yeah.
how did the dream of flight survive?
This realization forced inventors to explore a completely different approach,
Okay.
lighter than air flight.
Got it.
Instead of trying to muscle their way into the sky,
Right.
they turned to something that could simply float up.
Okay.
Enter the Montgolfier brothers in 1783 with their incredible hot air balloon.
Now, that must have been a sight to behold,
Yeah.
that first manned flight.
It was a groundbreaking moment.
Yeah.
Their balloon stayed aloft for a remarkable 23 minutes,
Wow.
proving that sustained flight was possible.
Right.
Of course, steering was still a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They were at the mercy of the wind. But it opened up a whole new realm of possibilities.
Okay, so controlled flight was the next hurdle.
Yeah.
Where did the key to that come from?
Believe it or not,
Okay.
the answer was found
Okay.
in a simple childhood toy.
What?
The kite.
Really?
Sir George Cayley,
Okay.
considered the father of aerial navigation,
Wow.
spent his entire life studying kites and applying their principles
Oh.
to heavier than air flight.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
We often think of kites as just playthings, but
Right.
they hold some pretty important aerodynamic secrets, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cayley recognized that fixed wings, like those on a kite,
Right.
were far more efficient for generating lift
Okay.
than flapping ones.
Makes sense.
He identified the 4 key forces at play in flight:
Okay.
lift, drag, thrust, and weight.
Okay, so let's break those down for a second.
Okay.
I get that lift is what gets you off the ground,
Yeah.
and weight is weight.
Right.
But what about drag and thrust?
Think of it this way.
Okay. Drag is the resistance the air creates as your aircraft moves forward. It's like trying to push your hand through water.
Okay.
The faster you go, the greater the resistance.
Right.
Thrust, on the other hand,
Yeah.
is the force that propels the aircraft forward, overcoming drag.
Okay.
It's like the engine pushing your car down the road.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Cayley figured out these basic principles
Yeah.
just by observing kites.
He was meticulous in his observations and experiments.
Okay.
He even built gliders.
Wow.
And you look at an image of his 1852 glider,
Okay.
you'll see it has a remarkable resemblance
Oh, wow.
to the gliders we use today.
Right.
He was truly ahead of his time.
So we've gone from birdmen to balloons to understanding the basic principles
Yeah.
of lift and drag
Yeah.
thanks to a kite.
A kite.
Who would have thought?
It's a testament to the power of observation and scientific inquiry.
Right.
But of course, those principles
Yeah.
needed to be put into practice.
And that's where 2 brothers from Ohio,
Okay.
enter the picture.
Okay.
Two brothers who would change the world forever.
Right.
The Wright brothers. Picking up where we left off, right, we've got those principles of flight laid out thanks to Sir George Cayley.
Right.
But someone still had to put them all together
Right.
and get a heavier-than-air machine to actually fly
Right.
under its own power.
Yeah, and that's where the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville, come in.
Exactly.
I find it fascinating that they weren't scientists or engineers by trade.
Right.
They were bicycle mechanics.
Yeah, it speaks to the power of passion and determination.
Yeah.
They were absolutely obsessed with the idea of flight.
Right.
But what set them apart from other dreamers and tinkerers
Okay.
at the time was their rigorous approach.
Yeah. The source material talks about how they built their own wind tunnel to test wing designs.
Yeah.
And really dove deep
Exactly.
into understanding aerodynamic.
They understood that achieving controlled flight wasn't just about building a powerful enough engine.
Right.
It was about meticulously studying
Right.
how air flows over and under wings,
Right.
how to control lift and drag,
Uh-huh.
how to steer and maintain stability.
Okay.
They took a truly scientific approach,
Right.
constantly experimenting,
Yeah.
analyzing data,
Right.
and refining their designs.
And that led them to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on December 17, 1903.
Yes.
12 seconds.
Yeah.
That's all it took to change the world forever.
Well, the first flight actually lasted 12 seconds.
Oh, okay.
But later that day, Wilbur flew for a remarkable 59 seconds,
Wow.
covering 852 feet.
That's incredible.
It wasn't long before they were making flights of over 30 minutes.
Wow.
And within just a few years, news of their invention had spread around the world, inspiring a whole new generation of aviators and engineers.
It's incredible how quickly things progressed from there.
Yeah.
But I imagine the initial focus wasn't on taking passengers for joyrides.
No, not at all.
Right.
In those early days, the practical applications of flight were what captivated people's imaginations. Think about it.
Yeah.
This was a time before widespread telephone service, let alone the internet.
Yeah.
The fastest way to get information or goods from one place to another was by train.
Right.
And even that could take days or weeks.
So the idea of using airplanes to speed up mail delivery must have seemed revolutionary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where the story of commercial aviation really begins to take shape.
Okay.
Just 11 years after the Wright brothers' first flight,
Okay.
a businessman in Florida launched the St. Petersburg-Tampa airboat line,
Okay.
essentially a flying taxi service across Tampa Bay.
I was looking at the photo of this airboat in the source.
Right.
It looks more like a boat with wings slapped on it
Yeah.
than a modern airplane.
It was essentially a biplane mounted on pontoons,
Okay.
so it could take off and land on water.
Right.
But the important thing is that it worked. The 23-minute flight cost $5,
Wow.
and there were no reported injuries.
That's great.
This proved that passenger air travel could be commercially viable
Right.
and relatively safe.
That's amazing to think that those early flights were happening
Yeah.
at the same time as World War I.
At the same time.
Yeah, I can only imagine how the war impacted
Yeah.
the development of aviation technology.
It's a tragic truth that war often accelerates technological advancements,
Right.
and aviation was no exception.
Yeah.
The airplane's potential in warfare quickly became apparent
Right.
for reconnaissance bombing and even aerial combat.
Right.
A lot of the innovations that would later shape commercial aviation,
Yeah.
things like more powerful engines, more aerodynamic designs,
Right.
and improved navigation systems were born out of military necessity.
So it's a bittersweet legacy.
Right.
Out of the tragedy of war came these incredible leaps forward in aviation.
Exactly. And as the war ended, those advancements began to filter into the civilian world. In 1918, the U.S. Postal Service saw an opportunity to revolutionize mail delivery
Okay.
and establish the first transcontinental airmail route,
Wow.
stretching from New York to San Francisco.
That's a pretty ambitious undertaking for the time,
Yeah.
especially considering the technology they're working with.
They were flying open cockpit biplanes,
Wow.
navigating by landmarks and those lighted airway beacons that were installed every 10 miles.
Yeah.
Can you imagine flying across the country in one of those,
Oh my God.
lying on those beacons to guide you through the night?
It must have been equal parts terrifying and exhilarating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a dangerous job.
Right.
But those early airmail pilots were true pioneers.
Yeah.
And as the airmail service expanded and more private companies began offering passenger flights,
Right.
it became clear that the Wild West days of aviation couldn't continue.
Yeah.
The industry was growing too rapidly,
Right.
and accidents were unfortunately becoming more frequent.
So there was a need for regulations, for
Exactly.
some kind of oversight to ensure safety
Right.
and standardize the way things were done.
Exactly. And that's where the Air Commerce Act of 1926 comes in.
Okay.
It was a landmark piece of legislation that laid the groundwork for what we know today as
Yeah.
the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA.
And from what you've said, it sounds like the FAA's creation was a direct response to the industry's rapid growth
Uh-huh.
and the increasing complexity of managing the airspace.
Precisely.
Okay.
The Air Commerce Act aimed to improve safety, standardize pilot licensing,
Right.
and establish a nationwide system of airways and navigation aids.
Okay.
It was the beginning of a new era in aviation,
Wow.
one where safety and regulation would go hand in hand with innovation and expansion.
So we were talking about the Air Commerce Act of 1926,
Right.
which really marked the beginning of the modern era of aviation.
Yeah.
And, of course, the birth of the FAA.
Yeah.
What were some of the FAA's early priorities?
Well, right off the bat, they tackled the issue of pilot and mechanic licensing.
Okay.
In 1927, the very first pilot's license was issued.
I would guess that honor went to one of the Wright brothers.
Surprisingly, Orville Wright was actually offered the first license,
Oh, wow.
but he declined it.
Really?
It ended up going to William P. McCracken Jr.,
Okay.
who was the head of the aeronautics branch at the time.
Okay.
There's a photo of him in the source material proudly holding his license.
Imagine being the first person to hold a pilot's license.
Yeah.
It's like being issued driver's license #1.
Yeah.
What else was on the FAA's agenda in those early years?
Safety was paramount.
Okay.
They took over the operation of the lighted airway beacon system, which was crucial for navigation in those early days.
Right.
They also started introducing radio beacons,
Right.
a more reliable way for pilots to navigate, especially in bad weather.
So they were essentially laying the foundation
Exactly.
for the complex air traffic control systems we rely on today.
Exactly as air traffic continued to increase throughout the 1930s,
Right.
the Bureau of Air Commerce,
Right.
which is what the FAA was called at that time,
Right.
was tasked with creating the first air traffic control centers.
Wow.
It was a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
Can you imagine trying to manage all those planes
Right.
without a centralized system?
It'd be utter chaos.
It would.
It's mind-boggling to think how they managed it back then.
It really was. Early air traffic controllers had to rely on maps, chalkboards,
Wow.
and even mental calculations to keep those planes separated.
Oh, my God.
It was a high-pressure job, to say the least.
I bet. But, of course, technology continued to evolve.
Right.
How did the FAA adapt to these new challenges?
Yeah.
Especially as faster and more sophisticated aircraft came into play.
Well, the arrival of the jet age in the 1950s brought a whole new set of challenges.
Yep.
Jet aircraft were significantly faster and flew at much higher altitudes,
Right.
increasing the risk of mid-air collisions. This led to a string of tragic accidents, which ultimately prompted Congress to pass the Federal Aviation Act of 1958.
I'm guessing that was a major turning point for the FAA.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The act created the Federal Aviation Agency,
Right.
giving it full authority over air traffic control across the country.
Wow.
It also standardized regulations and procedures, further enhancing safety.
And the source material also mentions the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978.
Yeah.
What impact did that have on the aviation landscape?
The Airline Deregulation Act was a game changer.
Okay.
Before deregulation, the government tightly controlled the airline industry,
Right.
setting fares routes,
Oh.
and even limiting the entry of new airlines.
Oh.
The act removed many of those restrictions,
Okay.
opening the skies to competition.
All right.
This resulted in more airlines, more routes,
Right.
and crucially lower fares for passengers.
It sounds like it was a win for both the industry and consumers.
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
Of course, deregulation also brought new challenges.
Right.
The FAA had to manage a much more complex and dynamic airspace.
Right.
And there were growing concerns about the impact of increased air travel on the environment.
And then there was the 1981 PTCO strike, a pivotal moment
Right.
in both labor relations and aviation history.
The PTCO strike, which involved the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, was a major event.
Right.
When the controllers went on strike, President Reagan took a hard line,
Right.
firing over 11,000 of them.
Wow.
This had a significant impact on air travel
Right.
and also highlighted the crucial role air traffic controllers play in keeping our skies safe.
From what you've said, it sounds like the FAA has had to adapt to constant change throughout its history.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things they're focusing on today?
Their core mission, of course, remains safety.
Right.
They continue to develop and implement new technologies to improve air traffic control and aircraft safety.
Okay.
They're also working to address environmental concerns, promoting more fuel-efficient aircraft, and exploring ways to reduce aviation's carbon footprint.
So they're not just focused on keeping the skies safe,
Right.
but also sustainable.
Yeah.
That makes sense now for those out there who've been bitten by the aviation bug
Right.
and dream of becoming pilots themselves. What does that path look like today?
There are several paths you can take depending on your goals and aspirations.
Okay.
You've got everything from a sport pilot license, which is great for recreational flying,
Right.
to the highly coveted airline transport pilot, or ATP license,
Okay.
which is required to fly for a major airline.
Let's unpack that a little. What are the key differences between those licenses?
Each license has different privileges and limitations.
Okay.
A sport pilot license, for instance,
Okay.
allows you to fly certain lighter aircraft,
Right.
but has restrictions on how many passengers you can carry and where you can fly.
Okay.
A private pilot license gives you more freedom and allows you to fly a wider range of aircraft,
Right.
but you can't fly for hire. To do that, you need a commercial pilot license.
Okay.
And to fly for a major airline, you need the ATP, which is the highest level of certification.
So what's involved in obtaining a pilot's license? Where do you even begin?
The first step is finding a reputable flight school.
Okay.
It's important to do your research and find a school with a good safety record, experienced instructors,
Right.
and well-maintained aircraft.
Right.
Cost is a factor,
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be the only consideration.
The source material emphasizes the importance of finding the right certified flight instructor, or CFI.
Right.
Why is that so crucial?
Your CFI is your guide and mentor throughout your training.
Okay.
They'll not only teach you the technical skills of flying, but also instill in you
Right.
the principles of safe and responsible airmanship.
Right.
They'll push you to be your best and prepare you for the challenges you'll face in the air.
So what does the training process itself look like?
It's a combination of ground school and flight training. Ground school covers things like aviation regulations, meteorology navigation, and aircraft systems.
Okay.
It's the theoretical foundation you need to understand how airplanes work
Right.
and how to operate them safely.
Okay.
Flight training, as the name suggests, is where you actually get behind the controls
Right.
and put those theories into practice.
I've heard the FAA is a big proponent of scenario tier training. What does that involve?
Scenario-based training is all about preparing you for real-world situations.
Okay.
Your CFI will simulate various scenarios,
Okay.
such as engine failures or unexpected weather changes.
Okay.
And you'll have to make decisions and take actions to manage the situation safely.
Right.
It's like a flight simulator, but in the real world.
It sounds intense, but also incredibly valuable.
It is. It teaches you to think critically, to stay calm under pressure,
Right.
and to apply your knowledge and skills in challenging situations.
Right.
It's an essential part of becoming a competent and confident pilot.
So after you've completed the required training and logged the necessary flight hours,
Right.
what's the final hurdle?
You'll have to pass a written knowledge test and a practical flight test
Okay.
administered by an FAA examiner.
Oh.
These tests are designed to ensure you have a thorough understanding of aviation regulations, safety procedures,
Right.
and that you can handle an aircraft competently in various situations.
And if you pass those tests, congratulations.
Exactly.
You're officially a licensed pilot.
It's a challenging journey, no doubt.
Right.
But for those with the passion and determination,
Yeah.
it's an incredibly rewarding experience.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
We've traced the evolution of flight from those early, often humorous attempts
Right.
to the complex and highly regulated world of aviation we know today.
Yeah. It's incredible.
We've explored the birth and evolution of the FAA
Mm-hmm.
and even delved into what it takes to become a pilot in the 21st century.
It's amazing.
It's a story that highlights human ingenuity,
Yes.
our persistent desire to conquer the skies,
Absolutely.
and our unwavering commitment to safety and innovation.
And who knows what the future holds?
Exactly. Will we see personal flying vehicles become as commonplace as cars?
Right.
Will supersonic travel make a comeback?
Who knows?
Will space tourism become accessible to the masses?
It's exciting to think about.
The possibilities are as vast as the sky itself.
Yeah.
One thing is for sure.
Yeah.
The world of aviation will continue to evolve in ways we can only imagine.
Absolutely.
This has been The Deep Dive.